Maumee, Ohio, is located at the foot of the rapids, a strategic location that became a center of commerce and conflict. The town of Maumee was founded in 1838, and its fortune rose and fell on the river. It was once hailed as the future great city of the West, but like the river itself, its course and direction changed over time. This is the story of Maumee. This program is made possible through the generous contributions of the Anderson Foundation, the City of Maumee, and Rotary Club of Maumee, with additional funding from the following: Maumee, Ohio is covered with historic markers and memorials to the history that shaped our region and our nation.
Native peoples and original peoples have been occupying this area probably for millennia, and then French, and then British, and then Americans as well. And the amount of history that happens from our perspective from 1600 all the way up through the War of 1812 is sometimes staggering, and I don't think a lot of people sometimes realize just how busy and how occupied our Maumee River Valley truly was.
The British built Fort Miami after the Revolutionary War to deter an American advance toward Detroit. The fort was actually in U.S. territory, but the Americans were opposed by a unified Indian army led by the Miami chieftain Little Turtle. Since the U.S. could not control this new frontier, the British retained possession of the Maumee Valley.
America had been trying to win wars against Indians starting in 1790 and 1791, which would allow us to open up most of the state of Ohio for settlement. They finally put General Anthony Wayne in charge of the Legion of the United States to attempt to finally destroy this pan-Indian confederacy. He took his time. He trained his troops very well. He engages native forces on the 20th of August, 1794 in the Battle of Fallen Timbers, and he thoroughly defeats them and he routs them.
The battle was fought on the western edge of Maumee, and the retreating Indian forces went to Fort Miami for help. But the British did not want to risk another war with the Americans and refused to let them in. The tribes reluctantly signed the Treaty of Greenville, which relinquished their claim to the Ohio Territory and paved the way for settlement and statehood. Conflict between the U.S., British, and Native Americans reignited during the War of 1812.
We declared war on the 18th of June, 1812. 3 short months later, we've lost now what is the entire state of Michigan, the entire state of Wisconsin, parts of northern Illinois, and parts of northern Indiana as well. What is now the city of Maumee was really British-held territory by the summer of 1812 and going into 1813.
American General William Henry Harrison ordered the construction of Fort Meigs at the foot of the rapids. It was built to hold enough troops and supplies for the invasion of Canada. But after the disastrous start of the war, it became a pivotal defensive outpost. The British sailed up the river in force, landed their troops, and began an artillery bombardment of Fort Meigs on May 1, 1813.
If you know where First Presbyterian Church is and you know where St. Joe's Catholic Church is, those were where the main British batteries were, about 600 to 800 yards from the fort.
The Americans were outnumbered almost 2 to 1. But on May 5th, 1,200 Kentucky reinforcements sailed down the river on flatboats. Harrison ordered them split into 2 groups. 400 men landed on the south bank and fought their way into Fort Meigs. Colonel William Dudley led 800 men into what is now Maumee. They captured the British cannons, but couldn't destroy them. Before they could retreat back across the river, they were lured into an ambush by native forces.
They quickly realized that all hope is lost. The Indians had bought the British enough time to not only recapture the British artillery pieces, but also capture the bulk of the Kentucky troops. Of the 800 men that land on the north side of the river, 650 of them are killed, captured, or wounded in that fighting.
The defenseless survivors were forced to run a gauntlet of Indian warriors who shot, stabbed, and beat them. Another 20 to 30 Americans were wounded or killed before Tecumseh could cross the river and stop the massacre. The British ended their siege on May 9th, but launched another weaker attack 2 months later that also failed. The continued survival of Fort Meigs helped ensure the Maumee Valley remained part of the United States after the War of 1812. By the early 1820s, a trading settlement developed at the foot of the rapids. The early residents built homes, warehouses, and businesses along the river, and the town of Maumee City was founded in 1838.
Maumee is rather unique in that it wasn't settled like many frontier communities, people who came looking for farmland. It was actually founded by entrepreneurs who were hoping to build a city.
Businessmen and fortune hunters alike moved to Maumee City when word spread that Ohio was building a canal through the town.
James Wolcott was among the first who came into Maumee and hoping to make a fortune. He decided to purchase some of the canal lands, and in his case, it was a little unique because he happened to be married to Mary Wells, who was the granddaughter of Little Turtle, a great and very well-known Miami chieftain. As part Miami, Mary received compensation from the United States government for lands that the Miami held in Indiana, and with the money that she received, she and James Wolcott were able to purchase 300 acres of land along the river, and that's the land where the Wolcott House stands now.
In 1840, Maumee City became the center of Lucas County government, and a Greek Revival-style county courthouse was built on the grounds of the current library. The town was growing, and the early residents were committed to building a great place to live.
They really lost no time in establishing churches. They were really very intent on showing people that they were just a normal community, just like the one that you left behind. And the churches played a very prominent part in that. In fact, if you look at the founders of some of the churches, you find some of the same names were involved in the founding, let's say, of the Methodist Church and the Episcopal Church.
Some of Maumee's oldest churches are still used today. Although some early congregations have moved into newer buildings, they still remain an integral part of life in Maumee. In the 1840s, Maumee City was prosperous, and its future brimming with unlimited possibilities. Entrepreneur Jessup Scott predicted it would be the next great city of the West. But competition was fierce between cities along the river, and it was ultimately technology and location that decided Maumee's fate. Sails were replaced by steamships that were too big to navigate the shallow water at the foot of the rapids. And canal boats couldn't compete with the speed and efficiency of railroads. Toledo became the economic leader in the region and replaced Maumee as the seat of county government as well.
The economy of the area began to slow down quite a bit, and Maumee became kind of a sleepy little town, which was in many ways very fortunate.
Maumee City became simply Maumee. Instead of a major shipping port, it blossomed into a great place to live and grow up.
It was a typical small town, hometown atmosphere. You know, when I was growing up, you could walk down the street and you knew everybody on the street, and everybody was friendly and happy and smiling.
You used to go to the uptown businesses and everybody knew you, you knew them, they knew your family. A good example was the funeral home. Rudy Dardine was there for years. It was always fun to watch him. He would come over to greet my dad and shake hands, and instead of shaking hands with my dad, he would always reach over and take my dad's pulse, and he would always say, "How you feeling today, Jack?"
They had a furniture company, they had a pharmacy. There was stores and restaurants up there.
They were more your hometown restaurants. They weren't the fast food like we know it today.
There was a place called Don and Sis's Restaurant, and we would hang out there.
Conant and Broadway.
Conant and Broadway, and then there was also one on the trail, right at the corner of Conant and Anthony Wayne Trail, the White House Inn.
Well, what was the Hamburg joint on Conant Street?
The Cottage Inn.
Cottage Inn.
I was just going to come to that now. The Cottage Inn. Well, that would be where the city building is right now.
Strictly hamburgers and french fries, hang out for the kids.
When Dick and I started dating, we often would go in there for hamburgers and a cup of coffee.
Some of the old eateries are still in their original location, although the names have changed.
We called it Dale Holmes's Restaurant. Now it's Dale's. In my married life, I spent quite a few hours at the Plantation Inn that was run by Don Buckout, fine restaurant.
We've had two main schools in our area. I was raised in the west end of town, and you were what we either called a Union or a Catholic. So you either went to Union school or you went to the Catholic school.
St. Joseph's Catholic School was established in 1856 and has educated thousands of Maumee's brightest students. The early one-room schoolhouses were merged into Union School in 1870. It was once 3 stories tall, but was modified and expanded several times over the years. It was also Maumee's first high school.
1937, when I graduated, I went to Maumee High School. That was the old Union School. I attended my freshman and sophomore years at Union School, and then we shifted to the new high school that was on Sackett and Cass Road.
A larger Maumee High School was dedicated in 1961, and the building on Cass Road became Gateway Middle School. When Union Elementary closed in 2011, it was the oldest operating elementary school building in the state. The district still operates 3 elementary schools: Wayne Trail, Fairfield, and Fort Miami Elementary, which is across from the former site of the Lucas County Children's Home, established in the 1880s to care for orphans and children from troubled families.
My family suffered a grievous loss. When I was 22 months old, our mother died. My father kept us together as long as he could, but when the Depression hit hard in the early 30s, he was laid off, as so many people in Toledo were. We didn't have food on the table most of the time, although he'd go out every day looking for work. Finally, in desperation, one day we found him. He had tried to commit suicide. They took him away and put 2 of my brothers and I in the Lucas County Children's Home. And for the first time in my life, at least, I was eating 3 meals a day and had a warm, clean bed to sleep in. So instead of being a negative, it was a godsend to be able to have that kind of an environment right here in Maumee, Ohio.
The kids there were raised and they had their own school, own hospital. It was pretty self-sufficient. They had their own gymnasium.
Boy Scout troop, basketball teams, baseball teams, softball teams, and football teams, all of which were very, very good. There are still people that I talk to in the Maumee area who remember those teams and the shellacking their teams got from them.
Maumee has always had great athletes, but none can compare with the legendary Dick Kazmaier, who lettered in 5 sports at Maumee High School.
He averaged something like 25 points a game when he was a senior in basketball, and everybody thought that he was going to become a really great basketball player for Princeton. Well, he went out for football.
I saw him in the newsreels, and he'd start running around and then he was being headed off by the opposition. In about 4 steps, they'd all be chasing him. I don't know how he did it.
He was a 2-time All-American at Princeton, and in 1951 won the coveted Heisman Trophy, which he later donated to Maumee High School. When fans weren't cheering their Panthers on to victory, chances are they could be found at the movies. The Strand on Conant Street was Maumee's first movie theater.
It had about an aisle and about 12 rows on each side. It's quite primitive.
In 1946, the Maumee Indoor Theater opened at the corner of Conant Street and the Trail.
I remember going with my family to see things like The Sound of Music, and I remember Helen Steinlein, who used to manage that theater. When you couldn't take your pop down to your seat, you had to stand up by the pop machine.
It was a quarter to get in, and if you were over 12 years old, it was 35 cents. So we used to spend our Sunday afternoons up there watching the double feature, and we also had fun out at the drive-in.
You drove in and they gave you a speaker to hook in your car, and
Wash your windshield for you.
they washed the windshield so you could see the movie.
After a Saturday night at the movies, almost everyone was up early the next morning.
Everybody went to church. Everybody dressed up. You went to church, and whether you were Episcopalian or Catholic or Methodist, all the so-called good people, the successful people, they all went to church.
The grocery stores were in the main part of town. We had an Ampey and a Kroger.
Back in those days, there weren't the big supermarkets and things like that. We lived in the 200 block of West Wayne Street, and the Pawkin grocery store was right on the corner of West Wayne and the 100 block. So it was just a matter of going down the street to go to get the groceries.
My uncle had a store. It was Brell and Stanford. He had a meat market, he had groceries, and people would come in and buy and then pay at the end of the week or something like that.
You could find almost everything you needed in uptown Maumee, including the person you'd spend the rest of your life with.
On a Friday evening, I was crossing the main street in town, and a little red pickup truck came driving down Conant Street, and this man tooted and waved, and I looked up, and it was Dick Anderson.
That time when I was driving through town in the pickup truck and I saw her, and I thought, holy Moses, that Franny Hammond, is she ever growing up? And she is gorgeous. So when she recognized me and gave me the high sign, I didn't waste any time, and I never looked back after that.
The Andersons have played a big part in the history of Maumee. Harold Anderson left a prominent job during the Great Depression to pursue his dream.
He had one of the best jobs in Toledo. He was running the National Milling Company in East Toledo, the big Nabisco mill. He got invited by Nabisco to move the family to New York and become a vice president of that huge corporation. He says, no, I got these 5 boys, and I want to have a family partnership. And he left it. My mother told me years later, you know the vibes that went through our family when he left that position. Oh, man, it's crazy. And he got into trouble. For a short period of time, it was Continental Grain Company. They were taken out in one of the big swings in the market. But Cargill, we worked out a deal with Cargill when Dad failed in getting that thing started and functioning. And Cargill took it over and set up a lease arrangement that would allow Dad not to go bankrupt, make his debt service payments, and stay solvent.
After struggling at the start, the Andersons built a lasting relationship with the farming community that became the foundation of their business. As the company prospered, it expanded into other related ventures, including fertilizer, railroad cars, and retail stores. In 2013, it joined Fortune magazine's list of the 500 biggest companies in the U.S. In 1940, approximately 5,000 people lived in Maumee, clustered in and around the uptown area. The space between Toledo and Maumee was primarily farmland.
Even just like on the other side of Key Street and so on, that was all farmland. And after World War II, you know, as they started to build homes for all these fellows that were coming back and starting families, they started eating up that farmland and developing neighborhoods. And a lot of the neighborhoods that are still around, you know, are from that early 50s or late 40s. That's when things started to really move.
During the Great Depression, the canal line was filled in by the Works Progress Administration to create the Anthony Wayne Trail, a new highway connecting Maumee and Toledo, which helped fuel the growth of both cities after the war.
As people started to come into the area, businesses started to move out a ways because we were cramped for room.
Golden Gate and Parkway Plaza shopping centers developed to serve the growing community. But it was an insightful investment in business and technology during the 1980s that would change the future of Maumee.
When we were growing up, we had one primary business in this community, and that was the Andersons. And they were the backbone of the city of Maumee. Many years ago, there were some individuals in this community that had the foresight to develop an infrastructure and create the Arrowhead Park industrial area. We have 15,000 people roughly that live in Maumee, and we have nearly 30,000 people that work in the community. And much of that was because of the development they made out in Arrowhead Park. They created that with rules and regulations that required landscaping and setbacks and trees.
You drive through Arrowhead today and you almost marvel at the fact that it's like a neighborhood of businesses. The streets, the landscaping, the trees.
They improved putting in an infrastructure, which is something that most communities would not have spent the money on.
That's what we have to thank them for, because without all that infrastructure and the money that they spent getting that together, we wouldn't have ever been able to afford to do the things we did later on.
The increased tax base from businesses in Arrowhead Park gave the city the resources to take on projects that would typically be impossible for similar communities.
From 2000 on, we replaced the police station, the fire station. We got a senior center remodeled, doubled in size. We built a pool.
The city purchased land from the Maumee School District and created a pool and sports complex at Rolfe Park.
We have 8 softball diamonds, about 6 soccer fields that are out there, and we have a large community swimming pool.
It really has been a great community place that everybody can be proud of and everybody can go to and have fun.
The city also took on a project to save and renovate the Maumee Theater.
The city took on the expense and purchased that structure and then completely renovated it.
Nobody saved theaters like this. And we had community meetings and everything with ideas, so we made it a multi-purpose facility. So it has a stage now. There's plays that go on there.
It was reopened, and it's probably the most utilized small theater in the area.
It's at the corner of Conant and the Anthony Wayne Trail, one of the busiest intersections in the community. And you're telling people to come into Maumee, you tell them to go to where you see the marquee on the indoor theater.
It looks beautiful as you come down the trail. You can't miss it with the neon lights.
To me, it's iconic to Maumee. I don't think people realized until we renovated it that it would be pretty much the beginning of the total revamping of our whole uptown, because it was such a quintessential part of who we were as a city.
The uptown business area was overhauled. A new municipal building was constructed. Street and traffic lights were updated, and a new Maumee-Perrysburg Bridge was completed. Fresh businesses began to populate the older uptown buildings. Since 1957, the Wolcott House Museum has preserved Maumee history.
It was the home of the Wolcott family for 5 generations, and Will Hull, who was the last to live in the Wolcott house, left her home to St. Paul's Church with the hope that it would be used as a museum.
The city purchased the house and leased it to the Historical Society. The museum now includes a train depot, church, one-room schoolhouse, and other buildings that help preserve the legacy of Maumee.
The Wolcott House was sort of a catalyst for historic preservation. People began recognizing the importance of preserving these homes and how important they really were to the integrity of a community.
In 2006, Maumee's effort began to get noticed, beginning with the judges for the All-America City competition.
When they announced our name, ladies and gentlemen, we give you the city of Maumee, Ohio. It was probably one of the most exciting times of my life. Not only did we receive All-America City Award, we also, Frommer's picked us as the best place to raise a family.
We were the only city in America to receive both those awards in the same year. And I think that just speaks a lot about the city of Maumee and the people who live here.
The Maumee River has always been the one thing that lured the early settlers and attracted the entrepreneurs and the people who originally came into the valley.
The river is beautiful. It's always been one of my favorite places to go to relax or to have family time or to just be kind of reflective. The towpath along the Maumee River is beautiful in all seasons, but especially in the summertime.
It developed into a recreation area. We've got boating and fishing, and it brings to this day a lot of fishermen in to get walleye.
This town is abuzz with fishermen and boats being dragged every year. As soon as the ice is broken, it's a big part of our economy. Those people eat at restaurants in town. They come to Maumee to catch the walleye.
Maumee, Ohio offers a unique blend of recreation, history, nature, and opportunity, which cultivates a community spirit that is embodied in the people who live there.
Nice parks, fine educational program, quality citizens. Who wouldn't want to live there?
It's kind of a throwback community to the way things were years ago. People really care. They care about each other, and they care about the city they live in. They take great pride in living in this community.
I grew up in Maumee.